Operation Grand Slam began on the 1st of September 1965 as Pakistan's attempt to regain the initiative after the failure of Operation Gibraltar. The offensive struck in the Chhamb-Jaurian sector, southwest of the main Kashmir Valley, with Akhnoor as the critical objective. This was not yet the Battle of Asal Uttar, but it was one of the decisive steps that made Asal Uttar possible. Grand Slam mattered because it translated the crisis from infiltration and counter-infiltration into a conventional offensive with armor and artillery at its center. It also forced India to decide whether the war would remain confined to Jammu and Kashmir or expand across the international border. In that decision lay the road to Punjab. If you would like to move beyond the podcast, you can see my available books at militaryauthor.me. And at trackpads.com, you will find magazines and galleries with hundreds of thousands of photos and videos to explore. Akhnoor mattered because roads matter in war. It was a communications point whose loss could threaten Indian positions and movement in the wider Jammu region. The Pakistani aim was to break through the Indian defenses around Chhamb-Jaurian, advance quickly toward Akhnoor, and create a crisis that would relieve pressure in Kashmir while changing the military balance. In simple, mapless terms, the offensive moved from the border area through a corridor of more open ground, pushing eastward toward the road and river crossings that linked Indian forces to vulnerable sectors beyond. The plan depended on speed. If the attackers could reach the objective before India stabilized the front, the operation might produce a result larger than the ground captured. Compared with much of Kashmir, the Chhamb-Jaurian sector gave armor more room to work. It was not a boundless plain, and it still contained rivers, broken ground, villages, and routes that could channel movement, but it was more suitable for tanks than the higher mountain country. That made it attractive for a conventional attack. Tanks could support infantry, overrun forward positions, and exploit gaps if the defense cracked. Artillery could prepare the way, and engineers could help with obstacles and crossings. Yet this kind of country also punished hesitation. When movement depends on a few roads and tactical crossings, a delay can give defenders time to regroup, bring up reserves, and turn a breakthrough into a slower, costlier advance. The initial Pakistani assault had real power behind it. It combined infantry, armor, and artillery in a way that placed severe pressure on the Indian defenders. Forward positions were hit hard, and the momentum of the attack created danger almost immediately. Indian units in the sector were not arranged to absorb an unlimited blow, and the early fighting produced withdrawals, disruption, and the familiar uncertainty that comes when a front is struck by a stronger force. But a defender does not need to win every minute in order to affect the outcome. Delaying actions, local resistance, confusion imposed on the attacker, and the simple friction of movement can all consume the one resource a fast offensive cannot replace: time. Grand Slam demonstrated both the promise and the difficulty of armored warfare after 1945. Tanks could still shock a defending force, especially when used with artillery and infantry support. They could give an attack weight, speed, and psychological force, but they could not abolish the need for coordination. An armored advance must be fed by fuel, guided by reconnaissance, protected by infantry, supported by guns, and directed by commanders who understand the tempo of the operation. If the attacking force pauses at the wrong moment, or if command arrangements become uncertain, the tank's mechanical speed no longer translates into operational speed. The distinction matters. A vehicle can move fast, while an army as a whole slows down. The offensive's most debated feature was the change in Pakistani command during the operation. Major General Akhtar Hussain Malik, associated with the initial conduct of the attack, was replaced by Major General Yahya Khan, a decision that later became the subject of sharp argument and competing interpretations. It would be too simple to say that this alone decided the operation, because battles are never reduced honestly to one administrative act. Terrain, logistics, Indian resistance, air activity, and the wider strategic situation all mattered. Still, command continuity is not a small issue in a fast-moving offensive. When an army is trying to reach a decisive objective before the enemy can react, even a temporary loss of rhythm can have consequences beyond the hours immediately lost. Indian forces, though under severe pressure, did not simply vanish from the battlefield. They delayed, withdrew, regrouped, and forced the attacker to keep solving new tactical problems. The fighting also widened into the air. Indian aircraft were committed in the crisis, and Pakistani air response followed, reminding both sides that modern land battle was no longer only an affair of infantry and tanks on the ground. Air power could disrupt, protect, punish, and complicate, even when it did not decide the campaign by itself. For a listener following without a map, the essential point is this. Pakistan was pushing toward Akhnoor. India was trying to prevent the road from opening, and every hour gained by the defense made the larger Indian response more possible. That larger response was the true strategic drama of Grand Slam. India faced a dangerous attack in Jammu and Kashmir, but it did not have to answer only where Pakistan had struck. On the 6th of September, India crossed the international border in Punjab, moving toward Lahore and widening the conflict into full-scale war. This decision changed the meaning of Grand Slam. Pakistan's offensive had been designed to create a crisis for India, but India's reply created a crisis for Pakistan on a front that threatened major cities, communications, and national prestige. The attempt to win operational advantage in one sector had opened the door to a broader war. Once that happened, armored formations in Punjab could no longer remain secondary to the story. This is where Grand Slam connects directly to Asal Uttar. Pakistan now had to respond to Indian pressure in Punjab while still managing the consequences of its own offensive in the north. The war's center of gravity began to shift toward the plains, where larger armored formations could seek a decision. The Chhamb-Jaurian sector would become one of the places where Pakistan hoped to restore initiative through a major armored thrust. That later plan, involving the drive toward the Bias line, belonged to the same strategic pattern as Grand Slam. Strike hard, move fast, and create a rupture before India could settle into a durable defense. But Grand Slam had already shown how fragile such ambitions could be when tempo was lost. The operation also teaches a broader lesson about the difference between tactical success and strategic success. Pakistan's attack achieved surprise and made important gains in the early phase. It placed India under real pressure, and it proved that conventional force could change the character of the war almost overnight. Yet it did not deliver a decisive result before India expanded the conflict. In armored warfare, this distinction is crucial. A tank-led or tank-supported offensive can win ground and still fail in its purpose if the enemy's army remains able to react at a higher level. The goal is not merely to advance. It is to advance in a way that breaks the opponent's plan faster than the opponent can create a new one.
For the soldiers and civilians caught in the Chhamb-Jaurian fighting, the operation was not an abstract lesson in tempo. It meant artillery fire, armored movement, broken positions, fear in villages, casualties that later accounts do not always measure in the same way, and the exhausting work of retreat, pursuit, and defense. Men fought in heat, dust, confusion, and uncertainty, often with only a partial view of the larger decisions being made above them. The commanders spoke in terms of roads, objectives, and operational opportunity, but the battlefield was experienced in smaller fragments: a crossing held too long, a gun position lost, a vehicle disabled, a message delayed, a withdrawal made under pressure. Serious history has to hold both levels together.
Grand Slam was famous not because it became a clean victory, but because it exposed the danger and the limits of a bold offensive at the edge of escalation. It came close enough to alarm India, but not fast enough to settle the campaign before India changed the scale of the war. It showed that armored power was valuable only when joined to timing, command clarity, and a political plan that anticipated enemy reaction. In the long arc of tank warfare, from early breakthrough dreams to mature combined arms maneuver, Grand Slam sits as a warning. Shock is not decision. A breakthrough is not exploitation. An objective that looks close on a map can move out of reach when time, terrain, and command friction intervene. By the time the fighting widened into Punjab, Operation Grand Slam had already done its most important work, though not in the way Pakistan intended. It had transformed the war from a crisis centered on Kashmir into a conflict of broader fronts and larger risks. It had forced India to think beyond local defense and toward strategic counterstroke. It had also demonstrated that armored ambition, however powerful at the start, can lose its force if momentum is not preserved. The road to Akhnoor did not produce the decisive result Pakistan sought, and the war's attention soon shifted southward and westward. There, around Chhamb-Jaurian and Asal Uttar, the same questions of speed, terrain, combined arms, and command judgment would be tested with even greater violence.
You've been listening to Famous Tank Battles. These battles were never just about machines. They were about doctrine, terrain, firepower, logistics, and the hard problem of turning shock into victory. For more military history writing and books, visit militaryauthor.me. And for magazines, podcasts, and a massive archive of military photos and video, visit trackpads.com. Thanks for listening.